Decades of economic downturns have been nearly fatal for the American city of Detroit, the city that was the traditional center of the world's automotive industry. Manufacturing plants have closed and thousands of jobs have been lost. But in the last few years, the city has gotten a very unlikely boost from a country halfway around the world, India. WION's Andy Roesgen has a look at how it's happening. Take a look.
Five, four, three, two, one, cut.
It looks like any traditional ribbon cutting you've ever seen to open a new factory. But this ceremony last month in suburban Detroit, the Motor City as it's called, was truly unique. This is the first vehicle assembly plant to open in the Detroit area in 25 years. And it's not coming from the traditional so-called Big Three auto companies of Detroit, Chrysler, Ford, or General Motors, but rather Mahindra Group of India, which is about as unlikely a twist as you can imagine.
We hope that we will gradually creep into the consciousness of the American consumer as the maker of very rugged, sturdy SUV and crossover vehicles.
The CEO of Mahindra's North American operation says this all happened very simply and very organically. Rick Haas was working for Mahindra in Chennai in 2013 and trying to come up with a way to make the company more competitive by building an automotive technical center somewhere in the world, a place to design prototypes for future vehicles. And his thoughts turned to his hometown of Detroit.
I'm born and raised here, and so obviously I made a pitch and I said, look, this is the Motor City. Let's go there and set up the technical center rather than San Francisco, rather than Stuttgart, rather than Turin, rather than some of these other places.
Once upon a time, Detroit was one of America's biggest and most important cities, the center of the auto universe in this country. But decades of economic downturns, especially the last one in 2008, turned Detroit into a shell of its former self. The city went bankrupt, and in its wake, vacant homes and businesses were left rotting. Just like this crumbling, abandoned high school. But take a look at what's happening behind the school, where the playground used to sit, and you'll see another Indian company hard at work. What looked like giant robotic giraffes in cages are helping assemble parts for Sakthi Automotive, now one of Detroit's largest auto parts suppliers. Sakthi opened up operations here in 2014 and now employs 600 people, with plans to add around 400 more by 2020. After the Great Recession roared through Detroit like an economic hurricane 10 years ago, the city was still left with an auto manufacturing infrastructure. Things like wind tunnels and racetracks never went away, but many of the people did. Jeff Davis was one of those who left Detroit when his career ended at Ford, but Mahindra brought him back as an engineer. He thinks the key difference here is that, unlike the very structured management style of Detroit's auto companies, Mahindra has a more free-form style.
In my career, I've been a chief engineer and a vice president of different organizations, and here I'm leading the group, and I'm out here on the floor doing bleeding brakes and changing trans fluids. So we're all actively involved.
In fact, that's how this whole plant came to be. Once Mahindra's technical center opened up a few miles away, a co-worker of Rick's, who just happened to enjoy hunting and fishing, suggested they look into building off-road vehicles. And from that humble idea came this: an entire building where a super-secret line of off-road vehicles called Roxor will be unveiled next year.
Less than a year ago, this building was a rotted-out shell with holes in the ceiling and flooded, vacant for years.
Today, Indian workers shuttle in and out of here to share their expertise with the Americans. Mahindra employs about 200 people now, with plans to add another 400 by 2020.
We're also just thrilled, all of us here that have been with the city for our whole lives, that the city resurgence is real, the Renaissance is really happening. People and companies are coming from all over the world to invest here.
So how does Mahindra in Detroit avoid the pitfalls that so damage the Big Three whenever the next economic downturn happens?
You know, my experience with the Big Three has always been, when times are good, they grow as fast as they can spend money, and they don't seem to have an ability to control it. You know, and then when times are bad, they gotta cut. And again, I don't see that here. I mean, we're building very slowly.
And in a city that is fiercely protective of its Big Three, the Indian companies are giving back to the community. Sakti prides itself on a program to hire ex-convicts to get them back in the workforce.
Mahindra is proud to present this check to keep growing Detroit.
The city has spent several years trying to tear down all those abandoned homes and buildings and planting sustainable farms where they once stood. And these farms will feed hundreds of needy Detroit families.
We recognize that when you give back to the community, that is, in fact, good business.
And so far, it's all working. The Indian companies are helping bring back jobs here outside the auto world. And Detroit's downtown is alive again with entertainment and professional sports. And thanks to India, which is helping restore the city's automotive roar once more. Andy Roaston in Detroit for WION.